Hello, welcome to the Headwaters Science Center live show for Tuesday, August 31st. Before we start, I just want to say that we are open 7 days a week here, 9 to 5 on Monday through Saturday, and Sundays we're open from 1 to 5 and 1:30.
So it's 9:30 to 5 Saturday, Monday through Saturday, and 1 to 5 on
Right.
on Sunday.
9:30 to 5 Monday through Saturday, 1 to 5 on Sunday. And so today, what we're going to be talking about is a little bit of human evolution and some of our relatives. So the question that I would like to open this little discussion on is, which of these four skulls, if I showed them to you, would you say is the least evolved? And there's a lot of answers to that question, a lot of ways you might answer that question. Maybe you take a look here at this skull and you think, well, the brain case back here is small. You can see where the seam of the skull meets here and see that a lot of it's pinched off. The brain is pinched off. There's not much room for the brain here. So maybe that's the least evolved. Or maybe this one is so small, and its head is so protruding. It's got the big carnivorous looking canine teeth on it. Maybe we'd say, oh, this is a less evolved animal. But then we come over here to some very recognizable skulls, and I'll spoil these for you. These are human skulls. This is a Homo sapiens. This is what we are. This right here is a different type of human. And you might think, oh, these are more evolved. These are better. These are farther along the evolutionary chain, so to speak, than these lesser skulls. But again, that might be misleading. And what you might actually be surprised to hear is that the only objectively least evolved of these four skulls is this skull here. The skull with the largest brain case, the skull which looks most, maybe very familiar to us. And this is the skull of the Neanderthal. So this group of humans died out some, 20 to 50,000 years ago? I can't remember the exact range of time, but in the last few tens of thousands of years. So you might be surprised to hear that when you see that this looks so advanced. But so then that begs the question, of these other three skulls, which is the most evolved? If this is the least evolved, and what one also might be surprised to hear is that these are all equivalently evolved. And with a little help from my friend James here, I just learned I was off. It's 230,000 to 30,000 years ago. That's the range when Neanderthals would have been existed until when they would have died. One thing to point out, just as an aside, there is an issue with the teeth on these skulls. There's no canines like these have, and that's just an incorrect part of this model. But back to the skulls. So what you might be surprised to learn is that all three of these skulls are equivalently evolved, at least in terms of time scale. So all three of these skulls fit under the same phylogenetic clade, which is a sort of grouping. No, I don't have my focus at that. I'll bring this up. You see the picture here? This picture specifically? Is that in frame? So what this shows, this is called a phylogeny, and what it shows is the relative relatedness of different types of animals through history. So this is a time scale shown here, which I don't have marked. And what it shows here is that humans, the Homo genus, chimps, and gorillas are all the same hominid taxa. They're all made of the same group. And so what that means is that we've all evolved the same amount, and we're all very, very related. And so you might have heard that humans and chimps are related. And where that comes in is the fact that we have a close last common ancestor. Meaning that in just a recent few 100,000 to 300,000, maybe a few million years, we just recently diverged from these. At one point, our ancestors were their ancestors, and they were the same. Their ancestors and our ancestors could have mated and given birth to ancestors that they themselves could have children. So it's an important thing to think about when studying human biology and evolutionary biology, that humans are not somehow superior to other animals that are also existent. We just happen to have a very adaptable and generalist set of skills that can be applied to many situations. But there are other animals which are just as well adapted to their situations as we are. They're just in different ways. So, for example, if you're a chimpanzee and you need to fight, or you need to hunt, or you need to eat some littler monkey like a macaque or something, well then having these gigantic, great big canine teeth to rip and tear at flesh can actually be a really useful thing to have. And that's something that we lack. We just have the small little canines here, small little vampire teeth. Or if you're a gorilla, we might think, oh, look at this dumb gorilla with this small brain case. But then we can realize, well, hey, if this gorilla needs to take an impact right here, look at how much of that shock is absorbed. Look at how strong this gorilla is. And the thing is, gorillas can weigh up to like a half-ton, if not more, whereas humans only weigh up to 200 pounds on average. So that's another distinction. You might look at the top of this brain and see these seams and think, why would a human skull then have these seams? Wouldn't that make our skull fragile and breakable? And the thing is, yes, it actually does make our skull more fragile and breakable, but this is something that's necessary for us to even be born. Our skull literally has to compress as we're coming out of the womb because our brains are so big. So having a massive brain isn't always just a benefit. It can actually, it costs a lot of energy. It makes it hard for you to, be given birth to, and results in your skull being weaker later in life, and makes you more fragile. So evolution is always a give and take of structures and functions. So then if we look at the Neanderthal again, bring the Neanderthal back into the picture, we can think a little bit about, why is this Neanderthal not around? Why is this one which looks so advanced not present anymore? And there's all sorts of explanations for that. There's the idea that Neanderthals had smaller groups of friends, essentially, family and friends, to solve problems with. Their brains weren't designed in a way, or weren't built in a way, that allowed them to have big social groups, like us humans can. Humans, we can build a group around an idea. We can say, we are the group which believes in growing corn. Maybe that's how we started our agriculture or something. Whereas Neanderthals, they have less of an ability to do that. At the same time, I don't want to sell our Neanderthal relatives short, because, first of all, we have interbred with them in the past, and there's a very, very good chance that you yourself have 2 to 5% of Neanderthal DNA in your genome that directly comes from one of these guys. And the other thing is, we have historical evidence showing that these guys buried their dead, that they held religious rites, that they actually had culture in the way that we do, but just maybe not in the same way. And unfortunately, or fortunately for us, I suppose, we won out. And then the one last thing that I wanted to go off is just realize that we are not at the apex of we're not at the end of evolution. Humans are in a constantly flowing stream of evolution. You have a population that you can imagine as a river of genes that's flowing forward through history. And sometimes that river might split into 2 different rivers of genes. In this river of gene, you get the Neanderthal. In this river of genes, you get the human. Maybe these rivers are close enough to sometimes start to cross into each other over and over, and that's why we have Neanderthal DNA in us. Maybe the streams have gotten far enough apart over the hundreds of thousands or millions of years that there's no way that we could breed anymore. That a chimpanzee and a human, for example, or a chimpanzee and a gorilla even, wouldn't be able to produce fertile offspring that can have their own babies, because those streams have diverged enough. But it's important to remember that evolution is not a stepwise path of improvement. Rather, it's a continuous process of organismal refinement, an organism making itself more adapted to its environment. And that doesn't always mean the same thing, because environments are always changing. So finally, to kind of cap it off, I thought that we could take a look at this real human skeleton here. And I don't have anything really explicitly evolutionary to say about this, other than to just put it in perspective, how interesting it is that we have a real human sitting here with us, and kind of looking over us in a way. It's interesting to imagine and reflect on, and just to know that so many people came before us and so many will come after us. And that in the future, humans will not look the same. We may evolve in a different direction. We may have all sorts of things. Maybe we'll have bigger eyes to accommodate dark rooms. Maybe we'll have smaller brains because stuff is easier, or maybe we'll have bigger brains because stuff gets harder. Maybe we'll get smaller legs. Maybe we'll have lower muscle mass if we start living in space in lower gravity environments. There's all sorts of ways that we could go. One thing I can guarantee is that you have evolved just recently if you can drink milk. The human adaptation to drink milk only happened in the last 1,000 years. That's after society started, after civilization. During human civilization, humans have evolved. So it's important to remember our place not only in our society, but also in our ecosystem, I think, is where I'd like to leave us off. Thank you for watching and listening and learning. And also, I'd just like to remind you again, hours 9:30 to 5 on Monday through Saturday, and 1 to 5 on Sunday.